Hello, my name is Ariel, like the mermaid. So in this video I'm going to talk about something that people have been calling TransFace, which is basically the idea of a cis actor playing trans roles. Now, this has been an issue that's come up a lot in the past few years. I think there was like a movie, Dallas Buyers Club, with Jared Leto playing a trans woman, and I think there's a new movie coming out with a fella named Eddie, I believe, playing a trans woman. So these movies like this, and there's been a tendency, and probably other movies and television shows, there's been a tendency to cast cis actors in the roles of trans women in movies. So yeah, the point is there's been some controversy about this. A lot of trans women and just transgender people really object to the idea of cis men, this new tendency for cis men to play trans women roles. Now, it seems to me that a lot of people are kind of confused about this controversy and are confused why there's a controversy about this, and they don't understand why there's anything wrong with a cis actor playing a trans woman. That there's the idea of, the best actor should get the part, whatever. But I think that, now here's my thing. I think, personally, this is a controversial view, and I think a lot of trans people wouldn't necessarily agree with this, and they're totally valid in not agreeing with this. But I don't necessarily think that cis actors can never play trans roles. I think there could be contexts where that could be appropriate. However, I do think there could be circumstances where it might be more appropriate. That totally doesn't mean that I think that the tendency, the frequent tendency recently, to cast cis actors in trans roles is appropriate, especially since it's typically, and recently it's been cis men being cast as trans women. For one, there's just not that many opportunities for transgender actors. There just aren't. Even though there's been more transgender roles, there's much more cisgender roles just in overall, and also they're giving these transgender roles to cis people, and it's hard for a transgender actor to convince people to let them play cis roles that are the gender that they identify with, because a lot of people casting directors are going to be like, no, we want to cast someone who's actually a cisgender woman for the cisgender woman part, or actually a cisgender man for a cisgender part, because that's just kind of how what they're used to. That's what they're accustomed to. So since there's just the common tendency to just give these roles to cis actors, you're taking away what could be great opportunities for transgender actors who are struggling and have a hard enough time getting work. You're taking away an opportunity for them to have roles. Also, why would you cast a part with people who don't actually have that experience, when you can totally find people who actually have the experience of being transgender, and they can use that and put it into their acting? It really doesn't make sense. I think it is very different if for example, if a cis woman plays a trans woman than if a cis man plays a trans woman, because and there have been, I think it was Trans America, which I haven't seen. I need to see more movies. Pretty much one of mostly I've seen Boys Don't Cry. I need to see more movies, clearly. But there was a movie called Trans America, for example, that had a cis woman playing a transgender role, a trans woman, which I think is much more appropriate, even though you're kind of taking away an opportunity potentially for a transgender actor. At least you're giving it to someone who actually identifies with the same gender as the character identifies. The problem with putting cis male actors in the role of trans women is that causes that the audience is aware, oh, it's an actor, a male actor, playing this role of a trans woman, and that inherently, particularly people who don't really see trans women as real women, that creates the mentality, oh, they're a man as a woman, because that's really what is happening with that actor. That actor is a man playing a woman, and so that creates the mentality that the role is really just a man being a woman, which is not really a mentality that you want to encourage. And just the fact that all these studios go like, oh, okay, so we got this movie with a trans woman in it, okay, we gotta get a cis actor, a cis male actor. That inherently suggests that they see the character not as, if they saw the character, the trans woman character, as a woman, then wouldn't they cast a woman in the role? If their first instinct is, oh, trans woman, let's get a cis male, that kind of inherently implies that they see the role as a male role and not a female role, which is what it is. So that's a huge, huge, huge problem. I mean, I'm just, not really going to trust people to be making a movie about transgender people, even if they do a lot of research, which a lot of these movies actually do, to their credit. They probably do quite a bit of research, and they actually ask trans people about their experiences, and they do research, they do interviews. But just inherently, and it's not necessarily overt transphobia. It's just that that's how they've been taught, is just that's what is their immediate instinct. These casting people is, oh, okay, so trans woman, oh, get a male. And I think we have to teach people to not have that immediate instinct, to go straight to that. Also, I mean, the big thing that I think is that a lot of these movies, I think, are clear Oscar bait. And like, for example, Jared Leto won an Oscar for his portrayal of a trans woman in that movie. I think it was Dallas Buyers Club. I haven't seen it, but I'm sure. I'm sure he did a good job. Probably, if he got an Oscar, I don't know. But the problem with having a performance where someone, where a man gets the award of Best Actor, is that reinforces the idea of the reaction. And this is kind of just in general a problem with movies in general. When you have, and I think this is a hard thing, because sometimes, it's cool when actors can play roles that are very different from them, and that's what a lot of people will say in response, is, hey, no, actors should be able to play roles that are very different from who they are. Like, that's what being an actor is being able to, play different roles that are different from you. Well, first of all, that's not always what an actor is. Sometimes there are actors who actually just play roles that are exactly who they are, and they just do a very good job at it. And I don't think that you should trivialize the work of actors who play roles that are exactly who they are. But second of all, there's not necessarily inherently anything wrong with actors playing roles that are different from who they are. But I think oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes I think it does detract from the film. And these, like, films that get Oscars for actors who play roles that are so different from who they are, and they transformed into that character, a lot of times, just that mentality around it, a lot of the audiences, instead of thinking, oh wow, that trans woman is going through, like, all this stuff, like, this really makes me think about how a trans woman, the struggles that trans women face, instead they're going like, oh my god, that man is playing a woman. Wow, they are so convincing at playing that woman character. And that really takes away from, and it first of all, encourages like the idea of, oh, trans women are just men playing women. which is wrong. And also it creates that, by having that kind of sensationalized like aspect of it, of like, oh my god, the actor is playing someone different from them, it kind of detracts from the film, I think, because you aren't actually empathizing with a character. You're going like, you're just, you know, so impressed at how an actor is playing a role that is different from who they are in real life. I mean, and I don't know, I think that sometimes it works, and that doesn't mean that a lot of these performances don't provoke empathy from people. But I think that that's just often is a problem. I think is sometimes these transformative roles have that aspect, and I think that aspect of it is really not necessarily appropriate, especially with the issue of transgender people, because transgender people have been demeaned and have been, I mean, just like, you know, there's so many shows you can see where they use the cheap gag of, oh my god, ew, it's a trans woman, and, you know, like they puke, and so, you know, like it's gross that like so many like people kind of do that cheap joke, which has gotten so fucking old. And it's so annoying, and like so many shows have done it, like Family Guy and tons of you know, shows have done it. You know, and I think that trans people need I think that people should be delicate in how they portray trans people, because it's a very sensitive issue, and we still haven't gotten to a point where people see trans people as equals, and we haven't gotten to a point where most people see trans women as women and trans men as men. I think it's a thing to think about, and I think the big thing is, I think that it's important that I think a lot of people, like cis people particularly, see the issue and see people bringing up TransFace, and they don't understand why it's an issue, and they feel like trans people should be grateful that they're being portrayed at all. And I think that it's important that people realize that there is a reason why this is an issue, and there's a reason why transgender people, many transgender people, are upset about these movies, and about this trend in Hollywood to be casting particularly cis male actors as trans women. But there also has been a trend to cast cisgender women as trans men. I think this should stop being a trend. I think there is a place. I mean, I don't necessarily want to say that there never can be a time where it's appropriate for a cis actor to play a trans role. I mean, the fact is, different projects might have different needs, particularly if it's theater. It's very different, or even if it's like a very small budget independent film. I mean, honestly, you might have to work with who you have available. If you're in a situation where you have to work with who you have available, you might have to make difficult choices. You might not be able to find a trans actor. You know, I mean, there's a lot of different, you know, and particularly like theater, it's a little bit different. I mean, with theater, I think particularly if it's a small theater, like for example, if it's a college theater production, I mean, you have to work with who's available, and so a lot of times, not, you know, you're not going to be able to find trans actors to play trans roles. I mean, and that's, you know, that's fine. You know, you have to figure out how to make it work and what's the most tasteful way to go about it. And that's one example. I mean, there also, you can do certain things to make clever points. Like, I've definitely heard of movies, I haven't seen any, but I think there was like, I think the director, there's a director by the name of Pedro Almodovar, who has actually, I believe that there was a movie that he made where he actually had all of the trans women played by cis women, but had all of the cis women played by trans women. So, I mean, that's kind of an interesting way of kind of playing with audience expectations and how audience views things, and kind of that changes their perception of the character's gendered, and kind of challenges the audience. And I think there's interesting things like that can be cool to play with, and it can provoke the audience to think. But I think, at the very least, people who make movies, Hollywood, particularly if not just if you're like an independent filmmaker, but particularly if it's Hollywood, these big budget Hollywood movies that have huge budgets, and oftentimes are going for Oscar nominations. With these movies, I think it's important for these people especially, and everyone, even independent filmmakers, it's important to recognize the potential consequences of portraying transgender people in certain ways. And I think you have to recognize why it's a sensitive issue, and understand that it's not people getting riled up over nothing. There's a reason why a lot of people are irritated about this and are hurt by this. I think it's just an important thing for people to consider. I think a lot of these people who make these projects, oftentimes they might be well-intentioned. And I mean, I think there's certain different projects have better and worse excuses for it. I mean, I think when you're actually seeing someone go from going through transition, I think that is a little bit more understandable. Particularly if you see them before transition and as they're going through transition, I think that's a little bit touchy. I mean, I think it'd be hard, because you wouldn't necessarily want to put a transgender actor, that could be really triggering for a transgender actor to have to actually simulate going through transition, because that's can be a painful process for a lot of people, and can be a difficult process. So there's certain projects do have different needs when you're portraying characters. But I just think the fact that people have the instinct, and the people who cast these things have the immediate instinct of, oh, trans role, oh, let's get a cis actor in. If that's their immediate instinct to cast a cis actor of the opposite gender of the character, it kind of tells, it's a little bit telling how they actually view the role, and it kind of makes me feel like they don't really get it. And they don't really see the character as the gender they are. And I think that's something that people should be more aware of, and should ponder when they're making choices about portraying trans people.